Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French.
He just pretty much just killed this guy that wasn't resisting arrest. He had his knee on the dude's neck the whole time.
That man, an eyewitness to the death of George Floyd. He wiped away tears as he listened to the rest of his 911 call from the last Memorial Day when he reported what he saw happening in real time to Floyd. Tonight, the former top uniformed officer at the NYPD, he will join us. Take a look at the Derek Chauvin trial and why this case is much bigger than the two men at the center of it, the police officer and the late man from Minnesota. Also, in our latest edition of So Right They're Wrong, we're going to focus on the Trump family, both Donald and his oldest son Eric at it again, but again, for all the wrong reasons. We'll show you what we mean. Plus, we will discuss the new push for vaccine passports, which would enable people who got their shots to fly, go to sporting events, and more. But they're getting some major pushback. We're going to show you why some people are against that idea of a mandate. And Washington Post columnist Dana Milbank, always an interesting conversation. He'll join us with a look at the Biden presidency to this point and how the new president is doing as he faces a laundry list of challenges. But we start in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's where former police officer Derek Chauvin is standing trial right now, with day 2 of the testimony ongoing. Chauvin facing the 3 charges on your screen: second and third degree murder, as well as also second degree manslaughter. If convicted of the lesser charge, he could face up to 10 years in prison. Conviction of the top charge could get Chauvin up to 40 years behind bars. I want you to take a listen to Chauvin's attorney and the defense that he's using for his client.
Derek Chauvin did exactly what he had been trained to do over the course of his 19-year career. The use of force is not attractive, but it is a necessary component of policing.
We'll get back to that. The case has been heavy on eyewitness testimony so far, and it's been pretty dramatic. We saw Donald Williams at the top of the program as he got emotional hearing his 911 call. Williams, he's also an MMA fighter, and he described what he saw that day by the officer with his knee on Floyd's neck.
On a blood choke, you would tack the side of the neck, and which you're in a Kimura or side chokes or things like that, you want to tack the side of the neck to cut the circulation of the breathing from your person. And then to get the choke tighter, you hit different shimmies, which I felt the officer on top was shimmying to actually get the final choke in while he was on top to get the kill choke.
The kill choke. The woman at the other end of the 911 call, she also testified. The next clip shows what that dispatcher said in court, but it starts with a portion of the actual call.
You can call me a snitch if you want to, but we have the cameras up for 320's call. 320 over at Cup Foods. I don't know if they had used force or not. They got something out of the back of the squad, and all of them sat on this man.
I first asked if the screens had frozen. My instincts were telling me that something's wrong. Something is not right. If this was a form of use of force, I was calling to let them know.
Some children also eyewitnessed what happened to Floyd that day. Some of them testified today, but their faces concealed since they were minors. Take a listen to this girl named Darnella, who was walking with her 9-year-old cousin when they came upon the scene.
I heard George Floyd saying, "I can't breathe, please get off of me. I can't breathe." He cried for his mom. He was in pain. It seemed like he knew. It seemed like he knew it was over for him.
Please tell the ladies and gentlemen, who is this?
This was the officer that was kneeling on George Floyd's neck.
On May 25th?
Yes.
Is this the way he appeared when you saw him on May 25th, kneeling on George Floyd's neck?
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I would say everyone were reacting multiple different ways from what they were seeing, which it wasn't right. We all know it wasn't right.
We also heard today from a Minneapolis firefighter who was on the scene.
And were you able to do that, any of those steps?
No, sir.
Why weren't you able to do any of that?
Because the officers didn't let me into the scene. I also offered, in my memory, I offered to walk them through it, or told them, if he doesn't have a pulse, you need to start compressions, and that wasn't done either.
And so are these things that you wanted to do?
It's what I would have done for anybody.
When you couldn't do that, how did that make you feel?
Totally distressed.
Were you frustrated?
Yes.
Firefighter describing when she came upon the scene, offering and being refused to give life-saving treatments for George Floyd, who she said she saw was clearly in major distress. Now, one more clip before I get to our first guest. The prosecution played previously unseen footage that included some of the witnesses pleading with Officer Chauvin to take his knee off of Floyd's neck.
He's not responsive right now, bro.
Does he have a pulse?
No, bro, look at him. He's not responsive right now, bro.
Check for a pulse.
Bro, are you serious?
Go
Just
check.
with that on
Let
his
me
neck,
see a
bro?
pulse.
Is he breathing right now? Check his
How long
pulse.
will have this conversation?
Check his pulse. Okay. Check his pulse, Tal.
I'm
Tal,
telling you
check
right
his
now,
pulse.
check his pulse.
Tal, check his pulse, bro. Bro, check his pulse, bro. You bogus, bro.
Don't do
you
drugs,
bogus.
guys.
Don't do drugs, bro.
Check
What
his
is
pulse
that?
right
What do you
now.
think that is? So you call what he's doing okay?
The point is, for minute after minute after minute, eyewitnesses saw the situation unfolding, and they knew that this was possibly a foreseeable tragedy. But you saw the resistance from the officers on scene, led by Officer Chauvin, to change anything, and we know how it obviously ended. I want to bring in our first guest tonight to discuss Philip Banks. He's the former chief of the department at the NYPD. That's the highest ranking uniformed member of the force. Hey, Chief, always good talking to you. The crux of the argument, it seems, from Chauvin's defense team is he was just doing what he was trained to do. Help me out. Does any police handbook say for as long as he did, he should have been keeping his knee on the back of his neck?
No, and when the defense presents their argument, I think the whole world is going to see that that has nothing to do with training. We have to keep to mind is that the defense needs to come up with a defense. And when you lack a defense, oftentimes we see is that they go to, it was part of training. I challenge anyone to suggest any part of police training, any place in this nation that they can point to and say that was part of his training. So no, I reject that. And I believe that the jury is going to reject that defense as well.
You know, I know it's a fraternity even after you leave. Give me an idea of some of the conversations, you don't have to put names to it, of former chiefs that you dealt with, rank and file guys, black, white. How do they look at that video? Is there a break, whether it be among senior guys and rank and file, along color lines? How do most cops look at the video? And do they say that's not who we are, or do they understand what Chauvin was going through that day?
You know, out of all of the controversial actions that have taken place in policing, this incident, from my personal experience, I have more police officers who have said, this is not who we are. But I haven't had enough, because there have been quite a few who say that I can understand what Officer Chauvin or ex-Officer Chauvin or Jailie Chauvin was going through. But I would have to say that this incident, more than any other incident, police officers have said across the color line that this is not who we are. But to my dismay, that has not been enough, because I can't see in any form or fashion anybody condoning the actions of which he took part of in this particular situation that's here. But Richard, if I can bring up something that's very interesting, that the first day of the trial, and it's very telling, and this is something that we have to address when we're talking about the culture of policing. The 911 operator, though a civilian, when she looked at the video and called the sergeant, her first words were, "You can call me a snitch if you want." Her very first words, "You can call me a snitch if you want." but something is wrong here. The fact that she led with that is very telling, and it's something that there's a lesson to be learned here or to be ignored. The fact that it entered her psyche, that she thought that she had the prefix, "You may call me a snitch," instead of just saying, "I think there's something wrong, and I'm going to report it as I'm required to do so." So that culture in policing, it still exists, that I'm the bad guy or the bad girl if I say anything wrong about what police officers are doing. And that's something that until we change that, we can come up with all of these rule changes and all of these so-called reforms, but you have to have mayors and you have to have the police chiefs who are reformers and who are culture breakers and culture builders. Other than that, unfortunately, the possibility exists that we will be here another 6 months or a year with another incident as unfortunate as this one.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Chief, because I was thinking, I remember with Rodney King, and again, if people remember, it was video at night, shot from basically seemingly across a ravine. The idea was, okay, we're going to put body cameras on these guys. We're going to have different kind of training. People are all walking around with cell phones now. This happened in broad daylight for not 30 seconds where the guy fell over the wrong way, for minute after minute. Wasn't this supposed to be something that was going to get fixed and it wouldn't happen again? Let me take you back 10, 15 years ago. Did you think that we'd still be having these kind of conversations about what was allowed and what wasn't in 2021?
Unfortunately, I did. I spent a lot of time in law enforcement, and I've seen rules created. I have not seen cultures breaking. And you can create all of the rules you want, right? And people find ways to get around rules. They find ways to interpret rules. They find ways to manipulate rules. But until you change the culture, and that's a different type of police leader, and that's a different type of big city mayor or the person who is in charge, to be able to say, I am going to change the culture of policing. And what we've been focusing on rules that can manipulate it, and focus on too less on changing the culture of these agencies. Now we had an officer like Chauvin who's had numerous complaints. Nobody's done anything about it. And yet we spent millions and millions and millions of dollars creating this defense for him. We've had to rebuild stores. There were fires, all because we don't want to be able to look at bad police officers and take action. And it's an injustice to good police officers, and it's an injustice to society in general. So until you get culture changes, don't be concerned with the police commissioner. Does he know this rule and that rule? You know, I'm not even so sure that some of these police chiefs and police commissioners have to have that much police experience. They have to be an experience, the courage, and the vision of changing a culture where it is applauded that when you see something wrong, that you come forward, not that you have to think, well, you can call me a snitch if you want to.
What are the stakes of this trial? What is on trial today? It's more than obviously just one man and some of the other guys who just stood around. What happens if this thing goes south and Chauvin walks?
Which is a possibility, which is a very possibility. The thing where don't believe your lying eyes on what you saw. I think it's even more than policing. The trust in policing is at stake. It's the trust in government, especially for certain groups of people, mainly people of color. The whole faith in United States government. You say this and you do this. If you go to school, if you're doing this and the police are doing that, we're going to do training. We've heard this for years and years and centuries and decades. But when it gets down to it, there consistently in this country, there are two separate rules. One for people of wealth, of money, and one's for the haves and one's for the have-nots. And it's a shame if this jury does not come back with the proper verdict. There was nothing that caused what he did to murder that young man.
Hey, Chief, it's always good talking to you. I appreciate you making the time for us.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Up next, we pivot to the pandemic. And we've got good news as well as bad news when it comes to COVID. Vaccine distribution hitting new records by the day. But health experts, they're warning we could see another wave of the virus as things open back up across this country. We've got the very latest after the break.